My father and mother sometimes ask me what I actually do as a futurist. It's not like I'm a carpenter or general practitioner. So, in this video, I will show you what I have in my suitcase. What are the tools of a futurist? What are the steps that I do when I conduct my work for organizations and companies, for example. But I like to start with a quote by Niels Bohr, a Danish scientist. He was a chemist and a physicist. And his quote is, "Prediction is very difficult, especially about the future." Well, I think that's true. I think it's also nice that Bohr was from Denmark, but why that's the case, I will get back to that later. But I think that's true, his quote, but also there are some steps you can do as a futurist for a futures research study, for example, that can help you to have a better understanding of the future and also help you to be better prepared for that. And I will show you how. So what's futures research and what steps does it entails? So after this video you have a much better understanding of what futures research delivers, how you should do it, and also what are the best practices in this field of work. Comment, like and subscribe. If you have a comment or a question, please leave your remark down below. Do you find this video fun or interesting? Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. So my question for you is, what do you think, what kind of work does not exist anymore in year 2050? Please leave a comment down below. My name is Joosten. I'm a futurist and also an innovation scientist, and I'm a keynote speaker. My central theme is how can you become future-proof? So what's heading our way for you as in your team or your company or organization? And also what can you do yourself to be better prepared for what's coming? If you want to hire me for a keynote presentation, a webinar or workshop, please send me a message. So when we look at futures research, what's the most important step? And what goes wrong if you don't do this step in the correct way? Well, after this part, you know better what is essential in this profession of futures researchers. And the first step is anticipate. And that's what you do at the start of such a project. And then you think, okay, how far ahead do I want to conduct my research? Do I want to think about the future in 5 years or in 10 years or in 20 years? And also how wide do I want to look, or do we want to look? For example, do I want to focus on the future of our team or our company or our market or our industry or maybe our nation? And also you have to think about what do we want to include? Do we want to focus only on technology, but maybe also societal factors, or also think of cultural changes, maybe some legal changes, political developments. So also what do you want to include? And also think about who do you want to involve in the workshops. Is it a small team? Do you also want to involve clients or maybe also suppliers, for example? And also who do you want to inform? And one of the most important things in this step of when you anticipate at the start of such a project is that you think, okay, what are we going to do with the end result? And this step often goes wrong. And so you deliver you conduct your research, your futures research, and you have a nice report or you have an awesome presentation, and that's that. But it's way better that you think in the start and also talk about it. Look, if we conduct our research, what are we going to do with it? Is it the basis for new innovation plans? Are we going to change our actions? Do we need to use it to recalibrate our strategy? That's an excellent use of futures research, which we'll get back to later. But it's important that you think about these questions at the beginning and not dive deep into the futures research. But it's better to start with these questions at the start. So after this step of anticipate, I will go through a couple of more steps, and they all start with the letter A. So, and occasionally you also see a video from Copenhagen where I did the study Applied Strategic Foresight program at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, TAC. And maybe this sounds a little bit abstract, all the following steps, but you have to take into account that I also do workshops in this, and they often take longer. So think about a couple of hours for 1 or 2 methods. So this really gives you an idea, gives you a sense, gives you an overview of what all the steps which I conduct as a futurist when I'm working with client organizations. But you have to be aware, if you really want to dive deep into the works, as to say, that often takes a little bit longer. So what's the best way to investigate relevant trends? So after this part, you can get better and faster insights into important developments and trends for your organization. And that's the step of analyzing. And there are different methods to analyze, but I'm very fond of the Futurist triangle. And we go to Copenhagen to see what that entails. So this was the first day of the course about strategic foresight. And one of the things we started with was the Futurist triangle. And it consists of 3 items: the weight of the past, the push of the present, and the pull from the future. So the weight of the past is about what are some of the structures or institutions that are really focused on the way things are at the moment. And the other one is push of the present, so what are notable trends, mega trends that are heading a certain way, that you can definitely see. And the third one is pull from the future. And these are novel developments, signals of change that can also influence the team you want to research. For example, the future of mobility, that will impact that team. So after this triangle, you look for tensions within the different items within that triangle. For example, you can think of a tension that arises between shared mobility and ownership. Like one of the future trends is pull from the future is shared mobility. Mobility as a service, that we don't own cars anymore. But on the other hand, you have the weight of the history, for example, that we, myself included, we like to have the sense of autonomy, the sense of freedom, of owning my own car. So you can notice, you can feel in your gut that there's a tension. And these kinds of tensions, they are interesting to elaborate on later in the following steps of your futures research project. So you have these tensions, and then after you have got these tensions from the Futurist triangle, you make a matrix. And the matrix here is here you have impact, and here you have uncertainty. And you have your tensions, and then you plot them on this axis. For example, think of the tension between leisure and work, how that's going to play out in the future. If we talk about the future of mobility, we're not sure, so the uncertainty is high, sorry, and the impact is low. And then you can also think about, okay, what has a high impact and a high certainty, dito low uncertainty. And you can think about the tension there is between electrification and fossil fuels. So I have a sense, we had a sense when we did the workshop, that electricity EVs is pretty certain, and also has a high impact on if you're a car manufacturer, for example. So this is tension, like I said, fossil. And then here, with a high uncertainty and a high impact, is, for example, access versus ownership of a car. And these items that have a high uncertainty and high impact, they're the basis of your scenarios. But I will explain that later. All right. So how do you use these insights you gained from this phase of analyzing, so exploring trends? How do you do that? Well, after this part, you are aware, you are familiar with a powerful method to really get these important insights into your organization. And that's the step of articulating. So articulating is about thinking in what ifs. So you have all these trends, but then you really articulate what does it mean for our organization when these trends are becoming reality in our in 5 years, in 10 years. That depends on what you the goal where you started with. Like how far ahead do you want to look? And this what if that you come up with scenarios. And scenarios are not like a prediction of the future, if you remember the quote from Niels Bohr, but it's just to use your imagination to think, okay, so to get out of the rut of what's here and now. So you're really focused on what's here, but scenarios really help you to open up your mind and to come up with different ideas of the future. And they can possibly play out in that way. And if that happens, you're already prepared for that because you trained yourself right now. So that's one of the best use cases of this working with scenarios. So in the previous steps, you came up with a couple of with the matrix. You came up with a couple of tensions that are high, uncertain, and also high impact. And these are the base for scenarios, because if you have a high impact and a high certainty, these are things you have to do something with that right away, because you're pretty sure that they are going to happen. So you don't have to elaborate that in scenarios because you already know that they are going to happen. You have to do that with something with that right now. But the basis for working with the basis for these scenarios are these tensions that have a high uncertainty and a high impact, like here, access and first ownership. And then you have a couple of these tensions, maybe 4, maybe 5. And then you're going to see if there are a couple of methods to come up with sort of the basis for scenarios, but this is the one mostly used. And then you're going to see if you're going to combine a couple of these tensions, and then you're going to see if it works, if the different scenarios are really different from each other. For example, here we have the vertical axis with access and ownership, and on the horizontal we can think of are the developments, are they high government regulated? Maybe government is really not that we can say it's regulated, or we say it's completely free market. And then you can say these are 4 different scenarios. So this is scenario A, scenario B, C or D. And then each of these groups, if you have a workshop, they can work on these different scenarios. So B is, then you think, okay, when their access is most important and it's a free market, B, then okay, how did we get here? How does it feel? How do people do? So these are all questions, and it also change. It's dependent how much time do you have, and also what are you going to do with it later on. So that's why I explained it's very important at the beginning that you think about what do you want to do with it. So then each of these groups can work on these different scenarios. So how do you translate the scenarios to strategy? So after this, you've given tools to translate these insights into actions way faster. And that's the step of assess. Assess is making the step from a scenario to strategy as a way to inform your strategy making. And there are a couple of methods for that. For example, backcasting is one. Backcasting is where you look at the scenarios and then you think, okay, if that's the future scenario, what does it mean? How can we prepare ourselves for these scenarios? Maybe there's one thing you can do that also works in all the 4 scenarios or in 3 scenarios. So that's a smart thing to do, for example. And another method you can use is wind tunneling. So wind tunneling, maybe you're familiar with that with Formula 1 racing cars, and you can also do wind tunneling of your strategy. So then you have your strategy and you plot that strategy on these scenarios, and then you can see, oh, our strategy does really work well in 3 scenarios, or this part of a strategy works well in all 4 scenarios, or this part does not perform in any scenario. So then you can think, okay, do we change up a part of our strategy or our whole strategy, for example? So this is a really important step, so that you really can put your work of the previous steps of analyzing and articulating in scenarios, then we really put into use to inform your strategy making. So what should you do after you have finished such a trajectory, such a future studies project? So after this, you know better than others what this work really demands of you and your organization. And that's the A of ACT. And futures studies, futures research is really something that's never finished. Like, it's not something you do once and then you're done, because especially in our day and age, developments are happening really fast. The world is changing in a quick pace. So it's something you need to do every month, every quarter, every year. That demands on the dynamics of your industry, of course. But it's not really one and done, but you have to keep it has to be something that's like ingrained in your culture, something that you do every, like I said, every quarter, every year. But it has to be something that's not finished. It's something that you keep on doing. And also, why should you do it? Well, Rohrbeck and Kuhn, they did, 2 scientists, they did research on how do companies perform, and also how future-oriented are they. And they found out, they did it on a 10-year scale, that companies that are future-oriented, so they are constantly doing this futures research. There are also some other factors, think of the culture, for example, and are employees aware of things that are happening, and how does this flow into new projects and innovation. There's a whole batch. But the most important thing is that these future-oriented organizations, they are 33% more profitable, and they also grow 200% quicker than their fellow organizations. So it's something that really pays off. So I think that's great, of course, as futurist is my work. And it's also in a scientific paper that it really, it's profitable to be future-oriented and to ingrain these methods I explained in the previous steps into your day-to-day operations as an organization. So like I mentioned, the methods of this futures research are now treated very briefly. We started with anticipate, then we analyze, then articulate into scenarios, then assess, thinking to strategy, and then you act like it's something you have to do again and again. And like I mentioned, I also do keynotes and workshops in that, and they take a couple of hours for 1 method, 2 methods, and also think of the whole trajectory. That's even way longer. But I hope this video gives you some idea, some sense of my work as a futurist. And overall, like I mentioned, I did a course at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And these are 3 insights I gained at the course. Well, some insights I gained at the course here in Copenhagen is one, you also need the right type of people in the room if you're going to do scenarios and talk about uncertainties and trends. So the right type of stakeholders. The second thing is that you also need to be clear about the issues. What words do you use? Do they have the same meaning for everyone in the room? Otherwise you'll it will hinder your discussion. And the third thing is also to convince a client when they want to do futures studies, futures research, and they're maybe hesitant to put in all the energy and people and the time and the budget, to talk with them. Well, what's the risk if you're not doing this? What kind of strategic risk do you? Maybe there are new entrants, new competitors, changes in the business model. So there are at least 3 things I learned here in Copenhagen at the course of the Copenhagen Institute for the Future Studies. So back to my story. Mom and Dad, if you're still watching, I hope that you now have a better sense, better understanding, better idea of what I do as a futurist. So if you remember, my question for you is, what kind of work does not exist anymore in the year 2050? Well, for me, maybe that's the work of a futurist. So, I have some time to think about that if that's going to happen. So thanks for watching. If you want to hire me, please send me a message. If you have a remark or a question, leave a comment. If you find this video nice or interesting, and I think you find it because you're still watching, give me a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. And I'm going to end with what I really liked about doing such a workshop in Copenhagen. So I really like the diversity in the groups, from public sector, from commercial organizations, and also the different backgrounds. And I think that's really the benefit of this workshop, to work with people from diverse perspectives and backgrounds. So let's see how we continue.